market. I got Jenny Horne with me in studio, hosts of Next Gen, to talk some stuff that might help us out this morning. We got the economic data the way we want it, Jenny. Can we get some tech commentary the way we want it too? It sounds like someone from, Bank of America might help us out with some Nvidia bullishness.
Yeah, and I will say that Nvidia, I do feel like we saw even in yesterday's session, the strength in which this name is trying to come back with. I guess where do we? I mean, like, how do we recover all these losses?
Right.
Lost about 140 billion in market cap on Monday, so still, looking still interesting. With BofA with a buy rating, $200 price target, saying that this is a very compelling price ahead of the GPU tech conference next week.
That's a double, by the way. Sorry, I don't think, just to remind people, because this thing dropped to $100.
Yeah.
It's almost a double they're looking for.
That is a double. That's a good point. That's a substantial increase. And I think it's interesting they highlight like the pipeline and the areas of focus they'll talk about at this conference next week, which makes it attractive, albeit well-expected updates, which they do expect on Ultra, Rubin, and the next generation networking for these scale-up opportunities and long-term opportunities. But all things considered, I think GTC, there's a mixed report, because I've seen some notes that highlight it's actually a positive catalyst for the stock, and some basically say it doesn't really necessarily specifically tout on AI. It's more like technology and like gear focus. So we'll have to see, because I've seen pretty mixed feedback, though. Well, there's something ahead.
Is he going to get on the stage?
Well, I bet.
Yeah,
he was a keynote speaker the last time, right?
Yeah. So, all right. Anytime, Jensen makes an appearance, it's been a while since, we've seen him. Like, I haven't seen the leather jacket in a little bit. We've kind of been missing it since it dropped as hard as it has. So anything, I think, at this point to kind of jazz up the narrative a little bit, put a little pep in our step.
Well, right, because I feel like when you look at, just like near-term catalysts for Nvidia, like what the options market's implying, there's really not a lot to be excited about, but at least we have this. So yeah, I think we're clinging on to just updates and catalysts, if anything, for Nvidia that aren't just weighed down by the overall macro. So the more and more that they can continue to remind people of why we saw shares, why this was the best performer for the last year, I think it's huge.
Narrative power.
Right. I think talk about Blackwell, talk about the ways in which you're still innovating, and like erase this whole DeepSeek narrative that I know the markets are quick to forget, but I feel like in tech that's still this massive looming overhang.
No, for sure. We never recovered, because that was the DeepSeek sell-off right here, and then we came back and failed again to get above that level. So the $50 almost, $40 to be precise, drop here from the highs, I think sets Nvidia up for any kind of news flow to potentially then become a short-term narrative, which obviously the market could use right now. So Bank of America is saying $200. You're going to make almost 100% on this trade at this point. Is a pretty big number to put out there. So we'll see if it pops the stock. You got another thing on Intel here to watch for us, right, with the foundry partnership?
So I think that this is fascinating because, Intel jumping 8% this morning on the fact that there's this group of semiconductor companies interested now in taking over the operations. So Taiwan Semi has pitched Nvidia and their other rival chip designers, AMD, Broadcom, about taking stakes in this joint venture to operate Intel's then high-powered chip fabrication business. So this was first reported by Reuters, but Taiwan Semi will take no more than 50% of a stake in the venture. Also will require the Trump administration to sign off. But what you know is that the report does come after Taiwan pledged a surprise $100 billion in the additional American investments last week, committing to building out three of these new chip plants, as well as 2 packaging chip plants and an R&D facility. I think, though, if you look at Taiwan Semiconductor, the success they've had in foundry and where Intel hasn't seen it. Like, for example, they're still facing huge competition, and we see their foundry business losing $13.4 billion last year. And I was like, why? Because Taiwan is such a genius business model. So I went back to that earnings call, and what they explained for the loss, they just said company-specific missteps.
Yeah, right. Story of Intel's 2 years.
Well, so that to me is like this is the most, I think, like it speaks to the longer term story of Intel. But their foundry business should eventually be, like extremely lucrative.
Well, it's worth something. It's worth something.
It is worth something. I think
it's what they've got basically at this point.
Well, right. It is what they've got at this point. But what Intel looks like, I think, as an entirety of an entity is still up for question. But splitting apart these businesses, I don't see as a bad thing at all, especially for the names even involved.
We've talked about the analogy to GE, I think, which is a good one. Had a business that got beat by new competitors, fell way behind, and then was a lot healthier after it split up. So maybe Intel's there at this point. Boy, by the way, this is so frustrating for Intel bulls that we had that massive fake out.
This is all I think about when I think about Intel this year. It really is.
It's the saddest chart, really, isn't it?
And see, that could tell you, hey, if there's this momentum still and appetite for the upside, I think if we see this overall hopeful recovery, I mean, Intel's not going to be just up for dead here.
Well, it's been $20 since August last year, so it's essentially been unmoved. So we'll see if this does anything with it. I think just activity in semiconductors that's not
catalysts. We need more catalysts.
Exactly.
Give me more news.
Negative.
Like AMD released a new processor yesterday, and I was like, awesome, because it gives us something else to talk about and hang our hats on here.
I'm going to watch CrowdStrike today too, because CrowdStrike had a good day yesterday, which bounced after getting hit on earnings. That was one of the main leaders yesterday, so we'll see if Intel can hold its bid. It kind of looks like it's shaky, and we'll see if Nvidia catches a bid on the price target. Thanks, Jenny. Appreciate that. On the stock front, got some hope for tech, got a decent narrative there with a couple bullish commentaries and actions from the semiconductor world.